Hey there, ready to really supercharge your everyday English?
Let's do it.
We're doing a deep dive today into the world of phrasal verbs,
All right.
specifically those tricky combinations of verbs and prepositions, the ones
Yeah.
that make English sound so natural but can be a real brain teaser when you're trying to learn them.
Right. Those little phrases that really trip you up sometimes
They really
when
do.
you're first learning the language.
Yeah, you've been wanting to master those powers.
Absolutely.
And we're unpacking three common but tricky phrasal verbs.
Okay.
Get along, break down, pick up.
Those are good ones.
They're good ones, right?
Yeah, those are really great examples because they really show how the same phrasal verb can have
Yeah,
completely different meanings depending on the context.
totally. Let's kick things off with get along. The source gives us the example. I get along with my coworkers.
Yeah,
It sounds simple enough, but there's more to it than meets the eye, right?
absolutely. I mean, it really conveys a sense of harmony in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's subtle, but you wouldn't say, I get along with my worst enemy
Right.
unless you were trying to be sarcastic.
Unless you're being sarcastic. I love that. Okay. That's a great way to remember it.
Yeah.
Now, breakdown is our next contender, and this one can really throw a curveball.
This is a tricky one.
Yeah,
It really can because it has both literal and figurative meanings.
totally. The source mentions a car breaking down, which is pretty straightforward,
Right.
but then it throws us, she broke down in tears. Talk about a complete 180.
Yeah, and that's what makes phrasal verbs so tricky. In the first instance, breakdown is describing a mechanical failure.
Okay.
In the second, it refers to an emotional collapse.
Right.
Same phrasal verb, totally different meanings.
So how can someone new to English ever hope to keep up?
Well, that's where noticing patterns and paying attention to context is key.
Okay.
Like, for example, you'll notice that a lot of phrasal verbs that use up indicate an increase or improvement.
Okay.
Clean up, cheer up, brighten up.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of a common thread that you see that can help you decode them.
That's a really helpful tip. Now let's move on to our final phrasal verb, and this one is a real chameleon pickup.
Oh, yeah, this one is tricky.
Yeah.
It really is, the source gives us examples ranging from the concrete, like picking up groceries, to
Yeah.
the more abstract, like picking up Spanish.
And let's not forget, sales are picking up.
Oh, right.
It's amazing how much ground this one little phrasal verb can cover.
It really is. It just goes to show you that you can't just learn the dictionary definition
Yeah.
of a phrasal verb.
Yeah.
It's all about seeing how it plays out in different contexts.
Okay, so we've established that context is king when it comes to phrasal verbs.
Absolutely.
But how can our listener actually get better at using them correctly?
Well, it's like learning a musical instrument.
Okay.
You wouldn't just memorize the notes on a page and expect to play like a maestro, right?
Right.
You have to listen to how the music is played. You have to feel the rhythm and practice until it becomes second nature.
That's a great analogy, speaking of practice. The source mentions trying to use these phrasal verbs in your own sentences.
Yes.
Like, don't be afraid to experiment a little.
Exactly. Language learning shouldn't be intimidating.
Yeah.
It should be fun.
Right.
So play around with these phrasal verbs, see how they sound in different sentences, and don't worry too much about making mistakes.
Because even native speakers make mistakes sometimes, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Language is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
What matters most is that you're communicating your ideas effectively.
And using phrasal verbs correctly can definitely make your English sound more natural and fluent.
For sure.
We've covered get along, break down, and pick up. What I'm curious about is how these phrasal verbs change depending on who you're talking to.
Oh, that's a great point. The source was focused on spoken English, but these phrasal verbs pop up in writing too.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably wouldn't use the same language in a formal email to your boss
Right.
as you would in a casual text to a friend.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's all about matching your language to the situation.
Exactly. Think about the tone you want to convey, the level of formality, and who your audience is.
Okay.
For example, you might say, I get along well with my colleagues in a job interview,
Okay.
but I get along great with my friends in a more casual setting.
So it's not just about understanding the different meanings of a phrasal verb, but also knowing when and where to use them appropriately.
Precisely. It adds a whole new layer of nuance to your communication.
This has been eye-opening. I feel like I'm finally starting to crack the code of phrasal verbs.
That's great. And remember, language learning is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
Take your time, be patient with yourself, and enjoy the process of discovery.
I love that. So to recap, we've dived deep into the nuances of get along, break down, and pick up,
Yeah,
exploring how context and even your audience can influence their meanings. And we've learned that mastering phrasal verbs is like adding a whole new dimension to your English, helping you sound more natural and fluent.
for sure.
It's like leveling up your language
I
skills.
like that.
Now, here's something to think about. We've talked about how context is key for understanding these tricky phrasal verbs,
Mm-hmm.
but what about the context of different English-speaking countries?
Oh, interesting.
Do you think some phrasal verbs might be more common in certain regions than others?
That's a fascinating question. You're right. Language is fluid, and regional variations are part of its beauty and complexity.
Mhm.
It's entirely possible that some phrasal verbs, or even specific meanings, are more prevalent in certain English-speaking countries or regions.
So while we've given you a solid foundation, it's important to keep your ears open and pay attention to how phrasal verbs are used in different contexts and by different speakers.
Yeah.
You might just discover a whole new layer of meaning.
Absolutely. The learning never stops.
It doesn't.
Embrace the journey and keep exploring those nuances.
Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our phrasal verb deep dive. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and feel empowered to keep playing with these fascinating elements of the English language.
Until next time, happy exploring.
I love it.